Once we realize that our theories cannot be certain, nothing helps but self-criticism in this impersonal sense. It is the only thing by which we can improve our theories, get them nearer to the truth.
The trouble with self-criticism of the Crusonean kind, if I may put it like that, rather than the kind which is undertaken at the behest of the political police, is that it's like trying to tickle yourself. It just doesn't work. Or perhaps even trying to hit yourself over the head with a hammer. It doesn't work very well. And an invincible affection prevents one putting any real force behind the blow. In other words, in general, intellectual, genuinely intellectual self-criticism often fails because the critic and the criticized are one and the same. Well, an implication of that, of course, that science can't be an activity conducted by a Robinson Crusoe without effective criticism, is that science is a social institution. And in your later writings, you develop this a good deal into the idea of the theory of objective knowledge, that as well as the knowledge that's, in some sense or other, contained in the brains or minds of individual knowers, there is common knowledge which, to some extent, contains or overlaps that individual knowledge, but to a considerable extent goes beyond it.
Now, what I want to illustrate is the distinction between two kinds of knowledge. The knowledge, let us say, I know, and the knowledge, it is known. This I know is knowledge in the subjective sense, and it is known is knowledge in the objective sense. I want to stress that the basic knowledge is, of course, subjective knowledge, knowledge which is known to people. I will, however, show how far you can build beyond this basic knowledge and how incredibly important knowledge in the objective sense has become, especially since the invention of language, of writing, of printing, and everything which follows up to this. Logarithms, books of logarithms. These can be computed, and a computer can be made to print out a book of logarithms. Of course, somebody has to have the subjective knowledge needed for instructing the computer who will compose these logarithms. But the actual logarithms will be known only by the people who use them. And it is unlikely that they will be ever used more than a minute fraction of what is in a full book of logarithm, let us say, up to 7 decimals. It would be a library needed for keeping them. So there will be objective knowledge not used, not known to anybody. Now, theories are important for our lives in a sense in which it is rarely realized. Think of all that which is involved in a flight from, let us say, London to Edinburgh. No single person can have the knowledge in his head which actually enters here into this question of safety. And it is a lot of knowledge, of subjective knowledge, which is here related. But the subjective knowledge is insufficient. None of the subjective knowledges in the various people's head suffices. And something is there which nobody has in his head, namely the way in which all this is interlinked. This is built up by an organization, and this organization is objective and impersonal, although it has been developed during many years by mainly the correction of mistakes which we have made. Now, in this sense, the realm of objective knowledge is great, very important. The best example still is libraries. And the interesting thing is that the philosophers who have dealt with the theory of knowledge have overlooked this. They all thought of knowledge in the certain primary subjective sense in which people are there and act on the basis of what they remember, what they know. Hardly anybody has seen that the product of our thinking, which are very largely expectations, theories, especially theories, that the product of our thinking is really a kind of knowledge which just as well has the right to be called knowledge and is called by us always knowledge. We speak of scientific knowledge, meaning, of course, objective knowledge, so that the product of our thinking becomes impersonal.
There's a remark of Burke's which comes to mind here, something like, the individual is foolish, but the species is wise. That perhaps doesn't want to be taken too literally, since if the species is to become wise, it becomes wise through the intellectual enterprise of particular individuals within it. But it seems to me a moral is that the individual can only make intellectual progress by utilizing the accumulated tradition of knowledge and procedures for acquiring knowledge, which constitute the system of objective knowledge. But there's one particular thing you go on to say about objective knowledge, where you say it's best understood in an evolutionary perspective, that it's something that's evolved in a more or less Darwinian way by selective preservation of some favorable elements and the competitive exclusion of undesirable elements. Now, what actually do you see as the significance of this comparison? Or perhaps it's more than a comparison. Perhaps it's a theory itself.
Yes, there is indeed a theory. It is called evolutionary theory of knowledge, which plays now a considerable role in biology, namely in evolutionary biology, especially since the last great developments in genetics. And this theory is really an application of the trial and error theory, the theory of that we learn by trial and error elimination. We learn from our mistakes. One can say that from the amoeba to Einstein there is only one step. Both learn by trial and error and the elimination of error. The main difference is that Einstein is intensely self-critical, which the amoeba is not. Einstein develops his theories and throws them into the waste paper basket many times before he comes to the theory which he would perhaps publish. The new way of looking at these things is really that life from the beginning is problem solving by this method of trial and error elimination. And this holds both for the individual organism and for the species and the evolution of the species.